All right.
Progress.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. We are here to meet 4 of the candidates for the DFL nomination for Congress. And I just want to give a little bit of information about us. Indivisible St. Peter Greater Mankato is an all-volunteer grassroots community organization that seeks to inform, empower, and inspire community members to get involved and take action at the ballot box and beyond. And although we're based in the Greater Mankato area, we function as a resource for a lot of folks across Southern Minnesota and CD1, and we welcome everyone to this event. So there are 6 active candidates running for the DFL nomination who will be joining us for candidate meet and greets. Today, we welcome 4 of them: Candice Deal-Bartell, Sarah Brakebill-Hacke, Rick DeVoe, and Richard Painter. And here is the schedule, which I'm putting in the chat right now. So here we go. So that's the schedule. Each candidate will have 30 minutes to hold the floor, and candidates have the option of staying in the rooms, and as long as they allow the candidate who has the floor to have it. And then we're going to have a brief introduction by the moderator, 10 to 15 minutes of prepared question and answer. So the candidates have all received the same question they can prepare. And then 10 to 15 minutes of open Q&A with attendees. Dan will be keeping time to make sure that we have time for all of these things. And then we invite you to sign up for the next candidate meet and greet with the remaining 2 candidates, Warren Anderson and Jeff Ettinger, which will take place in 2 weeks on Sunday. The 24th from 12 to 2:30. And after we meet with all the candidates today, we'll be having about an hour to participate in just attendee-only discussion about what we've kind of seen and heard. So without further ado, and notes and recordings from the candidate portions of these events will be shared on our social media platforms and our email list. So welcome. And I would like to introduce our first candidate who is here, Candice Deal-Bartell. Welcome. We've been asking, we asked all of our candidates to provide some personal information so we could introduce them. And so Candice would like to share that she is the founder of Cultivate Mankato Child Development and Resource Center. She's a founding member, board member of Cultivate Mankato, or Cultivate Minnesota Advocacy Group. She's a licensed K-6 educator, a former operations executive for an international technology company. Candice owns New Lifestyle Company, which is a leadership development and business services company. And alongside her husband, Nathan, Candice, she also owns Fun Bike Rides, which is an e-bike company in Mankato. She holds a BA from Washington State University, an MA from Minnesota State University, and forthcoming EDD in Educational Leadership from Vanderbilt University. Candice lives in Mankato with her husband, Nathan, 2 children, Nora and Lawson, and 2 pups, Hero and Polly, and she's excited to bring a fresh perspective, a new voice, and lived experiences to District 1 constituents. So the first question that we asked Candice, I'm putting in the chat. The first question is with regard to qualification and resources. How prepared and equipped are you to both win in a purple district and get things done in Congress? What resources, social, political, relational, financial, et cetera, would you be able to draw on?
Well, thank you very much. And I will answer the question, but I just wanted to give you a big thank you for putting this forum together. It's really special to have this time with you all. So thank you. And to get to your question, my entire life has been about assessing opportunities and taking chances. And throughout my life, I have made some beautiful mistakes that I got to learn from, but taking chances has opened doors of opportunity for me. And running for this seat is one of those times where opportunity has opened. I feel like I've been preparing for this opportunity for a long time, and now I have a clear vision for how my life experiences fit into the spectrum. So I have a team of people ready to jump on board and knock on doors across the district, from Mankato to Rochester to Austin to Worthington, all across District 1. I have the ability to garner resources, including financial resources, technology, marketing, and administrative resources, and to use them efficiently. I do that with all of my businesses. I have the ability to communicate across party lines, to listen to questions, to think critically about solutions, and to bring alignment across all parties. And I think that's really critical for our Purple District. I have the ability to organize people around common vision and mission. So running for Congress isn't for the faint-hearted. It takes a lot of vulnerability, grit, tenacity, humility, and faith to run for such an important seat. But what I've learned about taking chances is that they become really historical moments in our lives, and they become part of our DNA, even if they don't always end up how we thought they were going to. I'm a go big or go home type of a gal. And some of my professional experiences that highlight my abilities to win over this purple seat, like introduced in my introduction, I'm the founder of a child development center in Mankato. There we serve about 200 children and have close to 100 employees that I lead on a day-to-day basis. My role in education is deeply rooted. I'm a former K-6 educator and have experience teaching across various grades in 3 different states. I was also an instructor of record at MSU when I was doing my master's program, teaching English 101, which takes a special heart. I have experience leading professional teams as an operations executive for a global technology company. During my leadership, I helped lead the team through a 2-year acquisition with an international multi-billion-dollar company. I also led teams through a variety of organizational changes, including company rebranding and software development projects with our international development team. I own a leadership development and business services consulting company. And through this company, I'm a trained leadership consultant and have consulted with organizations nationwide on developing high-performing teams. And as I mentioned in a conversation yesterday, I'm pretty scrappy and I'm pretty zesty, and I'm committed to the hard work that it's going to take, not only winning this, winning and trying to go for the DFL endorsement, but also being your representative as in Congress.
Great, thank you. Our second question, which I'll also put in the chat, and let me just make sure that that is correct. There we go. Is so with regard to the campaign, what distinguishes you from the other candidates? And if you became the DFL nominee, how would the other side come at you, and how would you respond?
Yeah, what you see is what you get with me. I'm an authentic person. I believe that transparency is key to healthy and professional and personal relationships. And I don't want to pretend to be someone I'm not. I'm not a career politician. And being a career politician isn't a prerequisite for running for office. And I think that that's okay. Public office was designed to be held by the people for the people. And being a representative for you means that I'm an extension of your voice, your values, and your livelihoods. And I take this job very seriously. We don't need someone with political experience. We need someone who isn't afraid to have hard conversations, who isn't afraid to stand up for what is right, who isn't afraid to ask for help and collaboration across the lines, and who isn't afraid to be authentic. Unfortunately, I think the other side will try to convince you and everyone else that a lack of political experience means weakness. As the nominee, my opponent would use my lack of political experience to claim that I'm incompetent and that I wouldn't be able to do the job. They would claim that I'm too liberal for Southern Minnesota simply because of my unwavering commitment to create inclusive and diverse policies. They would likely claim, because I don't have millions of dollars, thanks to my sacrifices to public service over the years, that I can't raise enough money to be successful. It's kind of like the small fish in a big pond mentality, but they would be wrong. My first strategy is to garner the unwavering backing of my party. It's like the saying, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. If elected, our DFL party would have to come together so tightly around my nomination. I would need to rely on the support in areas where I may be weaker. While only one person can be elected to this seat, the seat really isn't about me. It's about the collective we, the entire DFL party. My other strategy would be to approach opposition with grace, humility, authenticity, and fearlessness. Likely there would be a lot of personal attacks, efforts to render me as powerless and weak. And here's the thing, I'm resilient as hell. And my resiliency, grace, and humility are my superpowers. My third strategy would be to organize groups of people dedicated to supporting specific efforts of my campaign to make sure that messages were going across Southern Minnesota in cohesive, empowering, and emboldening ways in efforts to build alliances.
Thank you. Our next question, and I realize that these are taking a, they're hard to get all in there before in the time frame. But the next question is healthcare. We can all agree that our healthcare system is broken with too many unable to afford or access care. How would you propose to make healthcare accessible for all constituents in Southern Minnesota, both rural and urban? So.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I believe it is the job of our government to ensure that everyone has access to comprehensive and affordable care through a combination of private and public options. So expanding programs like Medicare and Medicaid to allow for more comprehensive benefits that cover all medical needs through one plan is a start. Looking at lowering the age of Medicare and reducing Medicaid qualifiers would provide access to those who are already being left behind. And comprehensive coverage needs to include prescriptions, mental health, rehabilitative services, long-term care services, et cetera. I think in Southern Minnesota, we are so fortunate to have the nation's best hospital right in Rochester. As Minnesotans, I think we have the obligation to ensure that we're supporting that infrastructure and ingenuity of that resource, but having access to healthcare is also critical. So in thinking about rural areas and potentially them being at a disadvantage in terms of accessibility, we could look at continuing investments into community healthcares and rural health clinics. My plan, if elected, there's already so many great things going on in this space. My plan would be to hook up with one of the task forces, like the new Democrat Coalition Health Task Force, which is a group committed to protecting and expanding Americans' healthcare. And I'd work alongside other advocates in this space to either author or sponsor bills to support a universal healthcare system.
Thank you. The next question is about education. So, and that is also in the chat. How would you propose to support public education, especially in rural areas, and stand up for students from all backgrounds and identities?
Yeah, for those of you who know me and have heard me before, this one is like a passion of mine. So I'm going to really try to cut this down just for the sake of time. But Southern Minnesota has some amazing school districts and beautiful facilities. And because of this process of running, I've stood in many of them over the past several weeks. Each one has its own unique vision and mission for teaching our next generation of children. And what is the common core and the common goal for every school is to provide a safe, welcoming, educational, and exceptional environment for all children. As educators, we do not get to pick winners and losers. Our job is to serve all children and all students. And part of that is our responsibility for designing classrooms, schools, curriculums, and administrations to teach and reach all children. What we've seen, unfortunately, in the local space and administrations is the mirroring of divisiveness and antagonism and intolerance and hate that we see in the federal narrative too. And it's unacceptable, and communities should stand up for what is morally right. There are racial, ethnic, and gender disparities within our education system that cannot be ignored or accepted as the norm. So while each community, particularly rural communities, will have different approaches to prioritizing diversity, equity, and inclusion, it should be a shared objective across our entire district that we do focus on that. Just in general, I think we've lost a little sight on what education is and the purpose of education. And the purpose is to bring people to as full of a realization as possible of what it means to be human. And our job as educators in our education system must keep this in mind and at the forefront of our approaches to education. Specific goals would be to increase Title I grants, increase special education state grants, and prioritize funds for mental health services and social emotional support. We need to invest in teacher training and recruitment programs. And we have seen how additional funds in the education system through the American Rescue Act have been helpful for schools, not only for the infrastructure, but for also enhancing mental health services, teacher training and mentoring programs, and community-based initiatives that support families. I think I can stop there. I have more to say, but for the sake of time.
Yes, thank you for keeping an eye on that. I know it's really hard. So next question on the economy. Rural economies have suffered under the Republican free trade model. What would you do to restore the Southern Minnesota economy and support workers, struggling individuals, families, and small businesses?
Yeah. So, I mean, I think what we've seen, and this is the good thing of globalization, we've seen an increased our global relationships, our access to information, our sense of humanity, our interconnectedness to each other. But it's also brought about a free trade model that tends to benefit large corporations and strips away jobs from American workers. And it's not to say that all future trade deals need to go away, but I agree with what President Biden's doing right now and saying, I'm not going to enter into any new trade agreement until we focus in on our infrastructure at home and on our workers. And a way for us to do that is to invest in energy, education, and infrastructure, all while supporting unions and workers' bargaining power. We need to increase minimum wage, invest in small businesses. They're the backbone of our economy, and bolster our middle class so that we can close those inequality gaps, income inequality gaps. So supporting Southern Minnesota means protecting the rights of our unions and their members. Companies, especially small businesses, need tax incentives to continue to invest in their employees. We need to establish national paid family leave and extend the child tax credit. We need universal preschools and investments into the childcare system that would not only create affordable childcare options for families, but also increase wages and benefits for the very hardworking childcare teachers. So I support investments into small business development centers that promote entrepreneurship and economic developments. And I think just in general, I worry about seeing fewer and fewer young people stay in District 1. And I think that's part of the potential lack of opportunities and some of the conservative views of economic development and growth that are in our district.
Thank you. On the environment, and this is also in the chat now, what policies do you propose to address climate change? Which groups, resources, or individuals would you consult to shape your policy on the environment, and what can we do here in Southern Minnesota specifically?
Yeah, so climate change is a serious issue. And unfortunately, I think the Trump administration really reversed a lot of the progress that had been made through the Obama administration. He essentially wasted 4 years, and that's a long time in the fight toward clean climate initiatives. And what we're seeing right now is that $500 billion historical investment, which is being proposed by the Biden administration, but it's being stalled. And we really don't have a lot of time to mess around with this particular subject. So obviously we need to reduce carbon emissions. We need to incentivize industries and individuals to make clean energy choices, including offering tax credits for wind and solar power. And then in Southern Minnesota, we know the importance of clean energy initiatives. Global warming has serious and negative impacts on the farming industry, including droughts and floods, change in the soil quality due to increased vehicle emissions, change in temperature fluctuations. So we need to work to establish tax credits for biodiesel fuels. And there's a bill right now that is sponsored by Amy Klobuchar on this, called the Homefront Energy Dependence Act, which incentivizes tax credits through the sale and production of biofuels and helps to emphasize the need for more biofuel infrastructure in Southern Minnesota. I think that's a really good plan. That's what I have to say.
Thank you. Anything else? And then just one quick question. The question is long because it's complicated, but the answer itself should just be just a second. The election. We have a unique circumstance here where, it's very confusing because we have a candidate who could win in the special primary election in May and then lose the official primary for the general election. And that primary is on August 9th. The interim period is a really delicate one where the special primary, the candidate who wins a special primary could be really vulnerable to negative ads. Given these high stakes, would you be willing to support the winner of the special primary in May?
100%. I said it before and I'll say it again. This race isn't about me. It's about the we. There are lots of candidates running for this seat. And if one is endorsed, as a lifelong DFLer myself, I would put my full support toward the endorsed candidate. That doesn't mean you won't see me back on these forums in 2 years. Great. But it does mean that I will put the best interests of the district and the party first.
Thank you. Whew. Thank you for that. I know that was hard to get through a lot. There's so much to talk about. We do want to give folks who are on the call an opportunity to ask their own questions. And so I'm going to go back to gallery view. So I invite there's a lot to process here. I invite anyone who's here to raise your hand, drop a question in the chat, unmute yourself, and feel free to ask a question. I'm seeing Ellie raise your hand.
Hi there. Say, this isn't a question, more than sort of a comment or a suggestion. And I don't know if it will go over well. People may not agree with me. But if I understood you correctly, you would support whoever gets endorsed at the CD1 convention. You would drop out of the race and support that candidate. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. I would like to suggest to all candidates that they stay in the race, even if they don't get the endorsement, simply because I feel like folks are just getting to know all of you candidates. And I think what I have been seeing at these various DFL conventions, it's a smaller group of people. And I don't know how big the CD1 convention is going to be, but I am concerned about letting a small group of people, I mean, I'm going to, but I would be concerned about letting a small group of people determine who the person is that we put forward. And I know that will rub people the wrong way, some folks, but I think it is happening more and more. I mean, Mark Dayton didn't observe the DFL endorsed candidate, and he went ahead and won. Same with Mark Dayton. So I just want to put that in your brain to think about it, to consider that, because I would like everyone to get a chance at this thing.
Yeah, and I really appreciate and I value that. And I think I would need guidance, honestly. I think we would just have to have an open conversation and say, what is really the best approach here? Because ultimately it's about being able to win this seat. And I think that is, it's unfortunate that special election, because I think it adds a lot of complication. And you're right, it speeds the process up where we don't really get to know each other very well and the capabilities. I worry that it would detract from the whole party. And so I would just need some guidance, just to be totally transparent, of like, what is the best approach here, to making sure that the DFL actually can get the seat.
Thank you. There's a question by Beth in the chat that says, is there any part of the current DFL platform that you do not support, or anything that you would add to the DFL platform?
No, I wouldn't say there's anything I don't support. It's funny because as a child, I grew up in a very conservative home. My dad is a Republican, and he always told me, when you grow up and you get a real job out of college, you're going to be a Republican. And it's like, nope, my convictions are still true to the DFL, and that's because I think typically DFL supports people. Right. And it's like we're looking at policy, we're looking at different things to actually support the livelihoods of society. And so that to me is the core of DFL. I do think, because there are a lot of younger people supporting DFL, that just remembering the Democratic farmers and laborers, and just making sure that those still stay in the narrative, I think is important.
Thank you.
Okay.
There was another question by Liz, who asks, what do you think is the most pressing issue facing Southern Minnesota?
That's a good question. I think it depends on who you ask. For sure, we all have our own pressing issues, but I definitely say access to childcare, affordable childcare, is one big issue across Minnesota. I've heard that from several delegates and constituents that as they went door to door, childcare was one of the big things. And then obviously affordable and accessible healthcare, I also think is really big for our district.
Thank you. There's another question in the chat by Julie. Decades ago, the federal government promised to fund 40% of SPED costs. In Rochester, the federal government funds about 7% of our costs. The cross subsidy impacts every single district in Minnesota and across the nation. And I'm guessing the question there is, could you speak to that a little bit?
I'm not really. I'm going to take note of that question and I'm going to, I'll get back to you, but no, I don't off the top of my head have the answer for that.
Great. Oh, and I apologize. There wasn't a question there. It was just a comment saying, just FYI.
Okay. Yes. No, I will document that when it's not my turn. I'll take a,
yes,
if it's okay to take a quick.
Okay. There's another question here from Sean, who asks, if it hasn't been addressed yet, how would you go about raising money in order to get your name known widely in order to reach those who don't follow politics too closely? So you've kind of touched on this, but like, I think a little bit more specifics on, getting your name out there and raising money in order to do that.
Yeah. Thank you, Yuri, and thanks for the question, Sean. This is tricky because it's like we are taking a drink out of a fire hose right now. I mean, we have like 2 months between, putting in your name and then the first election, and it's like it's hardly any time. So I am trying to leverage social media as much as possible, because as much as I'd love to go and door knock aggressively right now, we just don't really have the time. So I'm really trying to use social media. I'm really working with other groups to get my name out, and then to raise money, ask for donations, and keep going.
And we have a question from Dawn. Smaller communities had or have community hospitals. Some have a bitter taste in their mouths as it relates to Mayo. And so you might want to keep that in mind as you travel the district. The further you get from Rochester, the stronger the bitter taste. And so that's just a little piece of it.
Thank you, Dawn. I think that's, thank you.
There's another question in the chat. Are you concerned that increased biofuel production would shift agricultural production from food to energy in a way that might increase global food costs?
Yeah, I think that's a really, really good question. And I know that there's a chance that would happen, but I'm not too concerned that it would happen really aggressively and very quickly. I think it would be something that we could plan for really wisely. And that's where we get to support really our small local farms and within our communities.
Thank you. I apologize. I think there's a question that I missed from Kelly, who asks, if you get the DFL endorsement, how do you plan to get the rural communities and farmers support, which relates,
Yeah. And I think that this is one that I've been strategizing on for a while. I mean, and obviously, we wouldn't be running if we didn't think we had that chance to win it. I really think the biggest strategy is getting out and talking to people and having those really hard conversations, even though they're probably not going to end an agreement, right? It's still getting out there and putting yourself in those positions where you are able to have those conversations and try to find the bridge that can be built, because there always is one. And it needs to be, as candidates, we need to be open to understanding what that bridge is that can be built and trying to move it forward that way.
Any final questions? Anything else I missed?
I think you've got most, I think.
All right.
I'm scrolling through again.
And
did we miss anybody's question that's in the chat?
Yes. Patricia Mann has raised her hand. So Patricia, go ahead.
Hi, I'm from Rochester. Could you say again what your plan is with dropping out of the race? Did you say that if you weren't endorsed at the convention, you would drop out and not run in the primary?
That is my original, yes, I did say that. And the reason I said that is because I feel like the party needs alignment and not competition with inside the party. And my concern would be that if somebody else was endorsed by the DFL, that we would be competing against our own party. And that's not something that I want to do. I think if there's strategy in doing it and, we can talk about what that would look like, then yes, we could consider that. I would consider saying that it could benefit the party.
Okay, Sarah, have you been active in the party and gone to conventions?
Yes, I have. Yep.
I mean, my concern is I've been active. but I'm not a delegate to the first seated convention. So my voice will not be heard. So I think you should really rethink your position. I'm not against the conventions or endorsing, but I'm not sure that you should commit yourself to something.
Yeah, and I think, and honestly, and this is a question that can be very open-ended, or a response to that can be very open-ended. I'm not sure that there is, I mean, I think if the endorsement happens at the CD1 convention, then, we're still on the ballot for that May 24th, where you do get to go out and vote for your candidate. I don't think that there's a withdrawal period between those two things. So I would, all the candidates would still be on the ballot for this special primary. But it just, for the endorsement piece, I'm just not sure how active it would, to be in continuing. And honestly, I'm just being very transparent that I don't know, this is a very weird process and I'm not sure the right strategy. But what I want to say and reiterate is that I want to do what's best for the DFL to win this seat.
Thank you very much. Ellie, did you have something really quick to add?
Okay, we probably have time for one more question.
Actually, it's not a really quick question, so I'll talk to you in private. But I would say, just to your last response, I think it's okay to say I don't know yet, or I'm still thinking it through and checking, and I want to do what's best for the party. I think that's an appropriate answer. All right, thank you.
All right. Thank you so much, Candice. Thank you to everyone who asked a question. It is now 1:02, and so I would like to move on to our next candidate. Sarah Brakebill-Hacke is here with us, and she tells us that she's a former owner of a direct voter contact business. For 8 years, she was a former student president at RCTC, Yale College Counselor Senator for 2 years, YCC Mental Health Chair. She has a BA from Yale College in Global Affairs. And so our first question, welcome, Sarah. Great to see you again from the conventions. The first question is, number one, with regard to qualification and resources, how prepared and equipped are you to both win in a purple district and get things done in Congress? What resources, social, political, relational, financial, etc., would you be able to draw on?
Yeah, and I'm gonna answer that, but I also want to put a couple links into the chat so that you guys can read further on me. I've also written an article on how we achieve both food security and net zero carbon emissions. So I'm going to put those into the chat, and then I will get right into answering the questions. So first of all, thank you for inviting me here today. I hope that you all get a chance to enjoy this beautiful day. I have only just begun the process of fundraising, but I think my campaign will be viable in time to be competitive for the May 24th primary. Ultimately, I believe that attracting the financial resources will not be too challenging for the party nominee. The last DFL candidate raised almost $5 million and lost. And Tim Walz never raised more than $2 million and won 6 times. The fact that the district is purple will attract money on both sides. I grew up in this district and have lifelong acquaintances. My network is based in Rochester, which is the biggest and bluest city in the district. I have an extended community throughout the district with the support of Lead MN, which is an association of community college student governments throughout the state. There are 10 of them in the district. The former president of Lead MN is my student outreach coordinator, and the executive director of the organization has pledged his support. Building a student network is important to me, and I believe will benefit me most in November and the DFL party. I think the key to winning this district is to elect the candidate that has the broadest appeal to the Democratic base, that can mobilize women, BIPOC, LGBTQIA+ allies, labor and social justice advocates. I know that I can bring this coalition together. I will address the issues of electability in my optional questions later, and I hope this topic is discussed further in the Q&A as it is of utmost importance.
Yes, we agree. Thank you. Our second question, which is also in the chat, is about the campaign. So what distinguishes you from other candidates? If you became the DFL nominee, how would the other side come at you and how would you respond?
So first of all, I know that one of the struggles of Dan Feehan was we had this, like, is he from here? Is he not from here? I am the only candidate who grew up in Minnesota. I feel that my personal story and my attempt to become the first female to be elected in this district will gain widespread support. Shout out to Candice for also putting her name in the hat. And again, I'm super proud of you. I am the youngest candidate in this race, and I believe the one best positioned to gain support of the progressive, most active supporters. I support Medicare for all, capping of prescription drug prices, net zero by 2050, and comprehensive basic needs security as a human right, and a living wage. I'm sorry, hold on. Okay. And free community college and selected state universities. I am a strong LGBTQI+ ally, and rhetoric from the other side lately makes it obvious that they will target this community with talk about gender affirming medical procedures, transgender participation in school sports, and the use of public restrooms. I also expect them to associate my economic policies with the president, who is currently experiencing low approval ratings. Inflation generally and gas prices specifically will be used against the current administration and the majority in Congress, much like they have been in recent European elections. While many politicians like to talk about working across the aisle, protecting people's civil rights are not something to be negotiated. It is important for the public to understand that hateful rhetoric is not acceptable in any forum. We must confront it and support treating all populations with dignity, and that includes hate-speaking opponents. As Michelle Obama said, when they go low, we go high. And this is very true regarding this issue. With regard to economic policies, it needs to be noted that our growth rate is high, unemployment is low, wages are rising, and inflation is being fueled by excessive corporate profits. We need to point out that Republicans are the ones who blocked the child tax credit, which temporarily decreased childhood poverty by 40%, attempted to block economic stimulus, and needed infrastructure upgrades, including high-speed internet access. That's my answer to that question.
Great, thank you. Our third question is about healthcare. We can all agree that our healthcare system is broken, with too many unable to afford or access care. How would you propose to make healthcare accessible for all constituents in southern Minnesota, both rural and urban?
So before I left the UK last fall, I was a proponent of universal healthcare, but I figured that any way to get there was a good way. I had a personal experience with the healthcare system there, and I was so impressed that I'm now committed to a single payer Medicare for all system with caps on cost of prescription drugs of no greater than $100 per month total for anyone. We also need to massively upgrade in-home care for seniors and assisted living choices if this is the route that they choose. We need to subsidize healthy foods to reduce negative health outcomes and increase public health outcomes. That would be the natural consequence of that we would increase public health outcomes. And we need to normalize alternative healthcare modalities, such as naturopathy and traditional medicine from all of the world's cultures. As healthcare is a human right, along with other basic needs, we need to make it available at no cost to the entire population, as it is done in the UK and other societies.
Thank you. Our fourth question, which is also in the chat, is on education and inclusion. How would you propose to support public education, especially in rural areas, and stand up for students from all backgrounds and identities?
My response to that is I believe that the teachers have played an important role in informing the backgrounds and identities of all students and will continue to do so. We need to fund, support, and train teachers to create a welcoming and inclusive space in public schools. And we need to defend without compromise the civil rights of students, regardless of background or identity. We should not waver in supporting curriculum that teaches acceptance and affirmation of our entire diverse population. Public education is also an essential element in combating poverty, and our teachers need to be recognized as frontline heroes. I would propose a $10,000 yearly federal stipend plus free occupation-related tuition for all teachers nationwide as hero pay. Teachers should be paid and recognized as the frontline essential workers that they are, in line with other traditionally male frontline careers, such as firefighters and law enforcement. Licensed professionals such as teachers, aides must also be paid a living wage. They're often grossly underpaid, and the kids are our future.
And our next question is on the economy. Rural economies have suffered under the Republican free trade model. What would you do to restore the Southern Minnesota economy and support workers, struggling individuals and families, and small businesses?
Oh man, that's a lot to answer in
I
a short
know.
time.
Quick, go.
Oh, do it. 2 minutes or less. Go. Free trade. It's not only something that the other side supports. Many Democrats who bring a business first mentality to the government support it as well. Free trade is great for international corporations. Tariffs on foreign goods are not always the answer to correct this inequity. We need to negotiate fair trade agreements that focus on humanitarian efforts of our trade partners, demanding fair wages and reduction of greenhouse gas emissions by our partners, and a system in place to verify these efforts. At home, I believe universal healthcare would cause a huge boom in small business across Minnesota. The cost of entry into business for an owner who wants to treat her employees with dignity is nearly impossible and uncompetitive with larger businesses who have a greater purchasing power. This obviously also helps workers too. A living wage and guaranteed basic needs security, along with free community college and 4-year state university tuition, would lift up all of the community and creates a boom of innovation and equity.
Thank you. And on the environment, what policies do you propose to address climate change? Which groups, resources, or individuals would you consult to shape your policy on the environment, and what can we do here in Southern Minnesota?
We need to support and fund solar and wind, since this is currently the best way that we have to eliminate fossil fuels. We need to support the Green New Deal to facilitate this transition and achieve net zero emissions by 2050 at the latest. I would encourage you. So I put an article in the link that I wrote covering this issue for Cambridge. And although it's kind of targeted at the UK system, it's applicable everywhere. In this article, I covered a symposium by climate experts and tried very hard to summarize the challenges we face in the tension between feeding the world and achieving net zero. In the interest of time, I hope you read it. As agriculture plays a huge role in Minnesota and throughout the Midwest, I think the major contribution we can make is to innovate in land stewardship and sustainable regenerative farming practices. We can improve our own carbon footprint, and with the right investments, innovate and export this technology to developing countries. And so I think that this net zero by 2050 is really achievable if we work together.
Great. And I'm going to swap this a little bit so that we do the election question first and then other issues. So again, this election question, the unique circumstances of this election are confusing, but in short, a candidate could win the special primary election in May and then lose the official primary on August 9th. Do you support, sorry, I'm trying to reduce this. Would you be willing to support the winner of the special primary in May in order to reduce the chances of infighting among the Democrats?
So fun fact, I sent an email to all of my opponents a couple of weeks ago proposing this. So I obviously agree. I received agreement from 0 candidates. I received no response from 2, and 2 others disagreed. My proposal was that we all drop out except for the winner in May 24th, and that we appear publicly to support the winner to really drive the DFL nominee forward. And keep this agreement confidential if we all agreed. I don't feel bound by confidentiality since I got no agreement. I will let them all speak for themselves. If your group can talk them into it, others into it, I will also agree. But I don't think that it is wise for me to agree to this unilaterally.
So the answer is probably not, or no, or maybe got to look at it a little bit.
It depends. It depends.
Okay.
There's a lot of factors, right? Strategically speaking,
Absolutely.
I mean, there's so much going on there.
It's just, it's chaos. Who knows
Yeah,
what will happen?
It's like, you know, the endorsed candidate could not be the winner of that election, and like, do we have a good representative of the people in there? Does another candidate rally more? I mean, just there's a lot going on.
Yes, there's a lot going on. So there is a little bit of time. If there's something in particular that you would like to ask, that you would like to raise, but we also have, you know, the time for attendees to ask questions. And so I will leave it to you to decide whether you want to, you know, go on either
Yes,
side.
I think I want to address the elephant in the room, which is electability. It is, as you know, anyway. So I hope you all understand by now that I am the progressive candidate in this race. If not, please contact me anytime and let me clear that up for you. When I say progressive, I don't mean liberal, left wing, radical ideas. I mean policies that support people against corporate power. One of my opponents has very effectively spread a narrative that it takes a moderate to win in a purple district. This is a very effective trick that is used over and over again by corporatists who play on people's desire for unity and cooperation. They use buzzwords like bring business know-how to Washington or work across the aisle. I think a lot of candidates use these cliches mindlessly because they sound good without thinking about what they mean. The fact is that the moderate middle is disintegrating, and even those who claim to be moderate are actually ideologically aligned. They are just afraid to admit it. I want to point out a study, and I'm going to link that in the chat, but I'll do that in just a second here. It has a robust and comprehensive, this is a robust and comprehensive study of the phenomenon of polarization and what is really happening. I hope that you take time to digest and understand what it's saying. The candidate that wins the election is the one who can motivate and mobilize the base. I like our chances because Trump isn't on the ballot. Thank goodness. Turnout will win this election more than persuasion. People want something to vote for, to make them vote. I keep saying it, and I'll say it again, progressive policies win elections. To me, the central question for this organization and others like it is who is going to lead now and in the future by endorsing, supporting, and mobilizing for candidates of diverse, underrepresented backgrounds that we all desperately want. Are we going to lead this reformation to save America, or are we going to follow the party which has shown in the past to have divided allegiances? In my opinion, the progressive reform is the way forward, and I hope you agree and endorse and support me going forward. But I'm going to put this link in here because I think it's really good. It's a really good read. Let me see if I can get this link. And in the meantime, you guys can get some questions going.
Yes. Liz has a question. I'm going to move it to gallery view. Liz has a question. What is the most pressing issue for Southern Minnesota in your opinion?
Oh goodness, there are many, but I think that healthcare is one of the big things. I've heard time and time again that, you know, the cost of healthcare is outrageous and that prescription drug prices are too high, especially for like stabilizing medications. But also we have the issue of agriculture and the changing of climate that's going to make that more and more difficult in the years to come with like droughts and just like climate events. So I actually think that we should reestablish the national grain grain and feed stores, which will stabilize food prices for the consumer and stabilize the income for the farmers. The one thing that I learned I took 5 economics courses, and one thing that I learned is that transient poverty is one of the worst kinds of poverty. So doing that would help to alleviate it. I think those are 2 of the biggest issues in our district. But there are many.
Yes, there are many. Ellie, did you have another question?
So yes, I have a question and I have a comment that I just, Sarah, I'm making this comment to everyone. I'm going to say the comment first. But I'm making
Go for it.
all candidates that just a suggestion. I don't know if it's any good, but if you don't win the DFL endorsement at the May 14th CD1 convention, I'm encouraging folks to stay in the race for the primary, because we're all still getting to know you. I mean, all of the candidates, and I don't know how representative. I think that's going to be a smaller group at the convention. At the Blue Earth County and the SD19 DFL conventions, I think each of them had fewer than 40 people. And I'm going to the CD1 convention. I'm a delegate there. There are 12 of us going who are able to vote. And I don't know who I'm supporting yet, but I think that is not representative of, we will not be representative of all of Blue Earth County. And I think that it would be helpful for folks to, other folks to hear and get to know all of you and then vote in the primary. So that's one point, that's a comment. And then the second point is, the question is, immigration is going to be a big topic. It is a big topic. And whatever your position is, Republicans are going to hammer about, Democrats are for open borders. Whatever. I'd like to hear you talk about immigration, your thoughts about it, please.
Well, I am a strong proponent of supporting immigrants into our country. We were built on immigration. I think that supporting allies globally, or like supporting people globally, is both humanitarianly like the right thing to do, but it also helps our economy, and I think that we need to support immigration. What other question? Like, how did you want to follow up on that?
Well, I was just going to say, folks,
a path to citizenship is essential, like a clear path to citizenship.
Okay, well, and that's helpful to know. I was just wondering, because people often say, I support comprehensive immigration reform, if they do. And so if that was the case, I was just wondering what that looked like what that means to people.
Right. And I think that I need to study the issue more. I focus a lot on poverty. And I definitely, when the whole DACA thing came up, I was standing behind the recipients of DACA, and making sure that we do support our immigrants, who, especially those who don't know anything. There's so many who have grown up here, and children are just being ripped away from their mothers at the border. I mean, it's just all just makes my heart. But we, as a community, as a global community, we need to support our neighbors. A lot of these people, a lot of my friends are immigrants who came from refugee camps. And we have to support people and help them towards success. If, the world is smaller than we think it is. And one thing that I did study in global affairs is the impact of poverty globally, in even in industrialized nations. And we can't have a healthy community and a healthy world until we support all within our communities.
Thank you.
But I will research that more.
Okay. Anyone else? I'm not seeing any questions in the chat. Feel free to, and it's okay to ask the same questions of each of the candidates. So don't feel shy about repeating. And I'm not Any other questions? We probably have, feel free to raise your hand or just unmute yourself. We have time for a couple more. And I'm seeing this question here from Marion. You mentioned encouraging naturopathy and other alternative medical practices. If practitioners work outside the accountability of mainstream professional organizations, could this open the door to quackery?
So I hear what you're saying, but I think that there should be a step to like kind of bring it into the mainstream. First of all, naturopathy, they have to go through the same medical school. So they study, they do the same rigorous coursework. They just kind of take a different route. I know that when my son, he had these terrible stomach problems, he was dropping weight, like crazy, like he had 5% of his body weight. He was like 6 years old, and I kept bringing him to the doctors. And I was just like, what is wrong with my child? And they kept saying nothing's wrong with him, and he wasn't eating. And then I finally took him to a naturopath in Connecticut. And naturopaths are covered under medical insurance. So that was kind of cool. So I brought him in there, and they just did a panel, right? They just did a panel on what the vitamins and minerals that he had in his body. And they found that he was B12 deficient. It was so simple. He was B12 deficient. And so I started supplementing him with B12. And he now still has stomach problems, but he eats, and he's not losing weight, and he's not crying in agony every day. And I think that science integrates with these other practices. I think that they can work in tandem, and I think it's a way to really be culturally representative of various cultures, because there's different practices that kind of help support the body in different ways that are that I think would complement the current medical system. And they still need an education, and they still need to understand science. And I think that we could just work more collectively. So I think if done right, to answer your question, I think if done right, that I don't think that it's going to open the door to quackery.
Great, thank you. Elizabeth asks if there's any response to critical race theory that you have.
So this is another topic that I've, of course, heard being talked about a whole ton in the news, but it isn't something that I've researched in depth. I think that we need to support our BIPOC communities and change the way that we teach within the schools. We need to support, so when I was in ninth grade, like here's an interesting thing. I got in big trouble for standing up in the middle of my US history class and said, but who were these books written by? I said that, and I had no previous education that had brought me to that point. But it's true, right? Like we're not being taught the whole truth, and I think that we definitely need education reform to really write history in a way that teaches us what really happened and includes all groups. But as we go back to critical race theory, I need to understand that better to respond appropriately.
And thank you. Patricia asks, Republican messaging will be on gas prices and defunding the police. And so I'm guessing that the question is, how would you respond to that messaging?
Well, Biden has released a bunch of gas to try to reduce the gas prices. I also think that much like we have safety nets for other necessities like food, and as inadequate as they can be, we could also do gas vouchers for people who don't have the means, especially in southern Minnesota, right? Because like you have to have a car to get to a lot of places. But defunding, they think that the Democratic Party that we will push for defunding the police. I think that's what you're trying to say, right? That they'll target us and say we want to defund the police.
That's part of the Republican
Okay.
messaging that is likely to come up.
So I think that I would absolutely respond to that by saying that we need to retrain the police, and we need to focus on getting them adequate mental health care, especially since a lot of them have seen just like terrible events that they must suffer from PTSD. And I think that that impacts the way that they interact with community members. So I don't think that defunding the police is on my platform, although I think that we need to replace funding into places of training the police better, and having different kind of services interact in cases of like sexual assault. So just having more support and making sure that they're really trained well, because I just don't think that they are. I've had police say to me like, so where did you get your law degree? Like when I was out petitioning, or man, you care more about your rights than I do. And that's just like not appropriate. And they should know our rights.
Okay, great. I apologize. There are a few more questions. It is 1:31, so I want to keep an eye on the time. But just to get the questions out there, Beth asks, is there any part of the current DFL platform you do not support or anything that you would add? Judy asks the question on raising money to get heard and known. And so I just want to give you a chance to really quickly ask those before we move on. I know we are running a couple of minutes late, but I think.
So I would say that my views align with the DFL platform. I would say that there's still issues with accessibility within the DFL for candidates and people who come from marginalized groups. It's difficult. One thing that I noticed is that it costs $6,700 just to get the voter list from the DFL. So in order to be competitive, unless you're creative, is to be wealthy, and that's not how we get marginalized groups represented in positions of power, which is what we all say that we want. So I think that what I would say is that I agree with the DFL platform fundamentally on most things. I can't think of a thing that I disagree with at this moment. However, I would like to see more action that follows along with the talk. Like the messaging that we put out there, I would like to see it actually like show me. I think one thing that I learned often is show me, don't tell me, right? Show me that we're inclusive. Show me that we want marginalized groups represented. Show me, don't tell me. And then against the question of how to get heard and raising money and publicity, I think that raising money, you have to call different people within your network, everybody that you've ever known, and ask them to support you through financing. And I think that money will come naturally as long as you like address it, right? You have to actively be asking for it as a campaign grows in momentum. As far as publicity goes, I think that consistently connecting with local news publications and also connecting with leaders within your community, which I've been doing. Most of my focus has been really just having discussions with people who are leaders within their communities and who remain connected and active in politics, and just kind of like following that chain of who should I talk to, and just continuing to connect. And again, that'll just grow in volume, especially as like-minded people get on board.
Thank you so much for spending time with us. It was great to have the chance to have this conversation, and it is 1:34, so I would like to move on to our next candidate, who is Rick DeVoe. Rick submitted in his information form that he's a small business owner, former building trades member of the Heat and Frost Insulators Union, former human services professional. He's been active all his life in many different capacities on environmental and social justice issues in particular. Rick, are you here? Rick?
I'll check the participant list quick. No, I don't see him.
Okay. Let's see.
Is the next person on our list here?
Well, Richard Painter is our next person for the next time slot. Is he here yet? Nope.
I don't see him here either yet.
Okay, so perhaps he's planning to join for his 2 o'clock time slot. In the meantime, Dan, could you contact Rick to make sure that he's not having trouble getting in to the camp? Oh, here he is.
Oh, yep.
Great. All right, so Rick, are you here? Rick, can you
Might
hear
still be
me?
connecting.
Rick, can you hear me?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes, hi, thanks for being
Okay.
here.
Yeah, my pleasure. Sorry for the difficulty. I couldn't find the link, but here I am.
No problem. So I just kind of provided the same information that you had submitted on the personal information form. And I have been I've been putting the questions from our prepared question list into the chat. So I'm going to do that now so that you can address this first question, which is on qualification and resources. How prepared and equipped are you to both win in a purple district and get things done in Congress? What resources, social, political, relational, financial, etc., would you be able to draw on?
A great deal of experience. I've worked in campaigns off and on all my life. I've been a campaign manager. I've worked in every possible capacity in campaigns in the past. Just a great deal of experience. I've assembled a terrific team. I went out and worked for 3 months last summer on the Nina Turner for Congress campaign in Ohio, where I met a team of people who are helping me currently, 2 terrific social media people and data person. As well as I'm very fortunate to have a singer-songwriter friend of mine who's terrific, who's written 3 campaign songs for me already. So we have a good, I'm used to running grassroots campaigns, and that's what this is. And we have a strong message, I think is always very important. I'm running, as you'll learn more about during this call, on a federal job guarantee that I call Full Employment Plus. So I think we have a lot of strengths going forward here in the campaign.
Great. And with regard to the campaign, the next question is, what distinguishes you from the other candidates? If you became the DFL nominee, how would the other side come at you and how would you respond?
Well, I believe that the Republicans at this point in time, and they've been pretty consistent now for a while, are running against the Democratic brand, not against individual candidates. In other words, they characterize anyone of us who runs as being a threat to cultural values, a threat to individual freedom. They called Obama a socialist. They call Biden a socialist. Regardless of how moderate any one of our candidates' positions might be, they're going to brand us in the same way. So that is something in my experience with campaigns, are fundamentally about 2 things. One is, do the voters want to change, or are they okay with the way things are? And also values. Bottom line really is about values, and the Republicans scream their values, and they get us involved in cultural wars. And this, pardon me?
Why are you so far?
I don't know, was someone speaking? I just
Excuse
got
me.
interrupted.
Yeah, I apologize. We are holding the attendee questions until after the prepared questions section has concluded. So that will be in about 10 to 15 minutes. So we ask you to hold your personal questions and comments until that time period, but you're also welcome to drop your questions and comments in the chat at that time as well. Okay, thank you. Apologies, Rick, for that interruption.
That's okay.
Go ahead.
In this cycle, Republicans are running on things like cancel culture and CRT, and they want to pull us into their framing for a campaign. And I do think that we need to espouse values as well. And mine are wrapped up in this program that I'm standing on, which is a federal job guarantee, and the values that are imbued in that program are community, common cause, and fairness. And I think we need to speak to values in some manner during a campaign because, as I said, bottom line, that's what decides things. That's why the Republicans have been so successful beating that sort of drum from their standpoint of their values. Yeah.
Thank you. The next question is on healthcare, which is in the chat. We can all agree that our healthcare system is broken, with too many unable to afford or access care. How would you propose to make healthcare accessible for all constituents in southern Minnesota, both rural and urban?
Well, specifically, my program, the Federal Job Guarantee, will give anyone who's unemployed or underemployed a job in their community, working for their community, and anyone who's working full time will be covered by an expansion of Medicare. And I believe when it comes time, maybe in a couple of election cycles, where a program like this could actually pass through Congress at the same time, it'll bring sort of universal health care, Medicare for all in the side door. Because as a small business man myself, I own a bookstore in Red Wing. If people have the option of being in a program where they can get paid $18 an hour and have paid health care, paid child care, and paid leave, it would be a necessity from my standpoint as a small businessman to offer universal health, offer health care to be competitive. So the program would put a floor underneath the economy and de facto would bring universal health care via an expansion of Medicare to everyone.
Thank you. The next question is on education and inclusion, and that is also in the chat for our folks attending. How would you propose to support public education, especially in rural areas, and stand up for students from all backgrounds and identities?
Well, right now, in speaking with people in Minnesota, and as always the case, funding. We have a surplus right now in the state, and there's going to be a compromise. I was talking to a teacher yesterday. The Republicans are going to get a tax. They're going to insist on a tax reduction, which is going to take up a good part of that surplus. And then there's the question of what's going to be left over. Education certainly is a priority of anyone in the DFL. And from Congress, from the federal budget, there's always a question of what sort of funding you're going to get. So funding is obviously number one. The workforce, the teacher workforce has been destabilized due to COVID and under immense pressure right now. And getting back to the federal job guarantee, a lot of people would be, by the way, it's locally, the program is, the jobs would be created locally and administered locally, and teaching and support for teachers would be a big part of the program. So in terms of inclusion, well, I'm doing a podcast weekly for the campaign, and I had two young college Democrats from Mankato State on, and we had this discussion, and I've been in fact, when I ran for Congress in 2004 in the state of Nevada. And prior to the year prior, there was a constitutional amendment to ban gay marriage, and I spoke out against that at a time that it was very popular. It just passed the year before, so I've always been outspoken on LGBTQ issues, and will continue to be so. Do so.
The next question is on the economy. Rural economies have suffered under the Republican free trade model. What would you do to restore the southern Minnesota economy and support workers, struggling individuals, families, and small businesses?
Well, I was speaking with, in fact, one of my podcasts with a dairy farmer. He's a delegate from Fillmore County. I met him in Harmony and then went out to speak with him on his farm. And he gave me an example of something he's been working on that's just really common sense policy to me, which he calls fair wage milk. And what it would do is the first, I believe it was 1 million gallons of milk, there would be a set price, and that 1 million gallon mark in his mind would be sufficient to carry an average size farm. And then above that threshold, then you would have market pricing. So it's basically guaranteeing viability for small farmers. And I think that's probably something I would want to advocate for. And in this particular case, the mechanisms are already in place. It wouldn't take a great deal of political capital in Washington to perhaps get something like that done. I asked Vance, well, if we had a federal job guarantee, what would be going on here? Where could people work? And as an aside, he said the biggest thing, and his wife Bonnie, biggest thing to keep people on working the farms that want to work the farm is health care, because so many people have to go to find a job just to get health care coverage. But he mentioned the kinds of jobs that would be, he said, well, we need windbreaks. We always need windbreaks. There's riparian work to be done on the streams. He talks about driving by neighbors' homes that are elderly, and in some cases elderly and destitute, and looking at the chimney to see if there's smoke coming out of it because of concern for their well-being. And these are jobs that would be provided in the Full Employment Plus program that I'm advocating. He has his hands full as a farmer. He can't be, unfortunately, looking out for his neighbors the way he would like to. So these are a couple of examples of how I would approach things and how the job guarantee program would help.
Yes, thank you. I do want to just draw our attention to the time. It is 1:48. And so in order to give other attendees a chance to maybe ask a couple of questions and not run into the 2 o'clock time slot, there is a question about the economy that I've dropped in the chat. What policies do you propose to address climate change, or the environment? Sorry, what policies do you propose to address climate change? Which groups, resources, or individuals would you consult to shape your policy on the environment? And what can we do here in southern Minnesota?
I'm a long-standing environmentalist, worked on as far back as the Superfund. The program that I am backing, Full Employment Plus, has a component to reduce energy consumption, which I think is the number one thing that we need to do. And it would be via a mechanism called energy savings bonds. And people could take these bonds in lieu of pay in the program, and people could also purchase them akin to war bonds in World War II. And the way that would work is any bondholder's dividend would correlate to the reduction in energy consumption in their own utility on an annual basis. That's it's an important part of the program. The other thing is there's 2 federal backstop programs to the job guarantee, one of which is restoring natural habitat, which would include the planting of billions of trees and and work with the soil, those are the two huge nature's carbon sinks, as well as another aspect, which is affordable housing, and that's rehabilitating existing structures who have a lot of embodied energy, and that's another form of energy savings.
Great, thank you. And with regard to the election, one quick question, a quick response to this is, are you willing to support the winner of the special primary in May, given the high stakes surrounding the possibility that we'll have different endorsed candidates than primary winners and such things?
Yeah, conventionally speaking, that would make sense, wouldn't it? I couldn't tell you until we have this special election what I think would be best, and what best would mean is what best serves the voters and the residents of CD1. One scenario, which I think could be, could very well be, I think if I don't win the May 24 primary, I believe a moderate would be the choice. And if I were to continue on with my campaign as well, I would be who I am, which is a progressive, running a very strong grassroots campaign on the federal job guarantee. As you can tell, this is what I talk about, and a very positive message. And if I was going to direct my fire anywhere, it would be against the Republicans. So our moderate nominee would be right where they want to be, in the middle between a more liberal campaign like my own and the Republicans. So I think a continuation of my campaign under that scenario could be very beneficial. But I simply don't know what I'll do until we see the results of the 24th.
Great, thank you. All right, there are some questions in the chat. So Beth is asking, is there any part of the current DFL platform that you do not support, or anything that you would add to the DFL platform? And then Ellie, I see that your hand is up, and so I just want to, you can be next.
I would add a federal job guarantee, full employment plus. Other than that, no, I don't think any of us, certainly as old as I am, could have countenanced the threat to a woman's right to choose that we have right now, and I think it's top of mind for so many of us. And of course, that's in the platform. To directly answer your question, there isn't anything in the platform that I would not agree with.
And Ellie.
Hi there. Say two things. One is a request or a suggestion, and the other is a question. And I'm repeating myself. I'm asking all candidates that if you do not win the CD1 endorsement on May 14th, I'm asking all candidates to consider staying in the race, just because I think that it's a small group of people who decides that endorsement, and everyone is still getting to know all of you candidates.
Right.
And
right.
I think that it would be, I was telling folks, I'm a delegate from Blue Earth County. There are 12 of us 12 of us who get to vote. And I just think that that is not necessarily representative of Blue Earth County. And also I've made the point that Tim Waltz ran in the primary. He ran against the endorsed candidate in the primary, and he won the primary, and same with the election, same with Mark Dayton. So I just consider, that will not endear you to some people, but I just ask you to consider that. Then my question is regarding immigration. That is going to be a big issue for the Republicans, and I wonder how your thoughts on that. They're going to, whoever the candidate is, they're going to say they're for open borders, and I just would like to hear your thoughts. Thank you.
Well, I'll go back to the job guarantee. I mean, this is a country throughout our history who have welcomed immigrants, as we all know, and it's fulfilled a great need that's always there for lower wage work, and that hasn't changed. The demand is still there. Again, under the full employment plus job guarantee that I'm talking about, when people can opt in, when we put a wage and compensation floor under the entire economy, which is what this would do, people were going to be making a choices about, they'll have choices that they didn't have before. And the demand is still going to be there. So, frankly, I believe that with this program, we would be, thinking would reverse itself, and we would be welcoming popularly in the public's mind, welcoming immigration as opposed to resisting it.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. So there's another question from Marion, and this is on the environment. Oh, apologies. That was one that was one of our questions. Thank you, Marion. And there's a question from Liz, and she asks, what do you think is the most pressing issue for Southern Minnesotans?
Well, I don't think it's much different than would be the case throughout Minnesota and throughout the country. It's just a basic health and income insecurity that is pervasive. I think that overrides everything. That would be the way I would answer the question. I don't think there's anything in particular. I will find out though, because I'm going to be traversing the district. I'm a full-time. This is a full-time effort of mine, seven days a week. So there's more for me to learn. Maybe there is something I should know that I don't. That would be
Okay.
that would be important. Yeah.
Yeah, and one more question. Judy asks, as for healthcare, I know you have mentioned that Medicare for All will be given to those in the jobs program, but I'd like more clarification on insurance companies remaining in our system. What do you think about universal single payer?
Well, that's what I would be. It's what I've always advocated. Back to the 2004 campaign that I mentioned that I ran for Congress, I was against the war in Iraq, which was the primary reason, even though it was very popular at that time. But I was also talking about universal health care at that time, universal single payer health care, and that's 18 years ago. So it's always been my position, and I think that with the I'm advocate the federal job guarantee, which was first introduced by FDR, has always had broad public support, even among conservatives. It polls at 70%. So I think this is a great way to accomplish what we've been unable to accomplish with universal health care up to this point. It kind of brings it in the side door. And as I mentioned, as a small businessman, if we pass a federal job guarantee, then almost simultaneously we would be having universal health care, I think.
Great. I think we have time for maybe one more question. And again, questions that have been asked to previous candidates are totally fine, because then we can compare across. There's a question that came up earlier about how would you go about raising money to get your name out there for voters to know who you are across the district?
Well, I haven't made very many direct appeals. There's been so much to do in so little time. We're generating a really fantastic. If you go to the website, vote DeVoe, as I mentioned earlier, my social media team, we're getting contributions now. It's a grassroots effort, and I really think because the specific nature and the short duration of this campaign, I think most of the support, both in the human resource and in contributions, is going to come later in the campaign. But just just getting the message out, it builds on itself. And we're going to have enough money to run an effective campaign. And once we win on May 24th, this is a special election that's going to get national attention. It's a bellwether in a purple district, and there's going to be money coming from everywhere in support of whoever our nominee is. So money is not a big concern of mine. We're going to have enough, I believe, to get the word out. Well, nobody has enough time until May 24th, so we're kind of all in the same boat. But
Sure. Okay, great. And we do have 1 minute and one last question from Marion. Can you speak about how a jobs guarantee would help people with disabilities, both for access to services and job placement? And I do want to say 1 minute because we do have the 2 o'clock time slot is starting soon.
I actually worked in job placement and job coaching with individuals with disabilities, and we would prioritize. People coming out of prison. Anyone with barriers to employment would be prioritized.
Okay, great. All right. Thank you very much. I think that does it for this particular time slot. And now we will transition to our next candidate, who is Richard Painter. Is Richard here?
I am here. Some,
Great. Let me, there we go. So I will pin you and all right.
Can you hear me?
Thanks so much for being here. And I will, yes, for the personal information survey, there was a Wikipedia page that was included, but I want to give you a chance to just to give us like just a couple of minutes of information about yourself and your history, your qualifications, and all of that in connection to this first question about qualification and resources. How prepared and equipped are you to both win in a purple district and get things done in Congress? What resources, social, political, relational, financial, etc., would you be able to draw on?
Yeah, I hope you can hear me. Unfortunately, I'm traveling, so I'm a place where there's some background music. I hope that doesn't disturb you. Please let me know if this isn't loud enough. I'm Richard Painter. I am a professor at the University of Minnesota Law School. I teach corporate law, corporate ethics, business ethics, government ethics, lawyers ethics. And I, before I came to the University of Minnesota, was the chief White House ethics lawyer in the Bush administration. I tried to keep them out of jail. That was interesting. I was at the University of Illinois as a professor at the University of Oregon before that. So I've been teaching law since 1993, with the exception of my time in the White House. Was a liberal Republican for a long time, but found it, of course, to be quite difficult to be even a moderate in the Republican Party. And a lot of the ideas I've been writing about, particularly in the business ethics area, I found that the Democratic Party, prominent senators and members of the House of Representatives have been more willing to listen to me. And I worked with several of them over the years. And I would be thrilled to talk with this group about the ideas I have. I want to make sure we preserve enough time for questions, however. So if you'd like me to, I can go through the issues that I believe are most important for this election and that I would like to advance in Congress.
Great. And so the question, I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about how you plan to win in this particular purple district and what resources you would be able to draw upon.
Well, I have worked with Republicans for quite a long time, so I know what motivates a lot of voters to go and vote for the Republican candidate. And I also have worked with voters and with political organizers in rural America, including in Champaign County, Illinois, where I was before I went to the White House, and in Minnesota. I believe that we can convince rural voters to vote for Democrats, and here's why. Farmers are dependent on the weather more than anything for their livelihood. I can't imagine why a farmer would want to vote for someone who doesn't believe in climate change. It makes absolutely no sense. But we need to talk to farmers and to those who work with farmers, those who are dependent on agriculture for a living. It's not just the farmer, but people supply farmers and in rural communities, about climate change and how it's going to impact them. Flooding and drought are on the rise across America, including in Minnesota. First, a member of Congress from this district needs to recognize there's climate change and that we need to appropriate in advance billions of dollars of federal money for relief of farmers in the event of flooding or a drought because of climate change, and it will happen. Second, to fight climate change, we can generate wind power in the rural Midwest, including in southern Minnesota, by installing windmills, wind turbines, and putting them on the electric grid. And we need federal support for that. Just as we had federal support for rural electrification in the 1920s and 30s. We now have an opportunity for rural electrification in the 2020s and 30s, but it's the other way around. Instead of generating electricity in the cities and bringing it to the rural areas of America, we are going to generate wind power, electricity in the first congressional district, bring it to Minneapolis. We grow their food for them, so we might as well be providing the energy as well. And that will energize our economy as well as help save our planet. So we need to get rural America on board with respect to wind and solar energy. And this situation with Vladimir Putin underscores the fact that we've been dependent on foreign dictators, whether it's the Saudis, the Russians, and others for fossil fuels that are also destroying the planet. So I believe we could reach out and bring those voters in.
Thank you. The next question, and that's in the chat, is about campaigns. And so what distinguishes you from other candidates? If you became the DFL nominee, how would the other side come at you and how would you respond?
Well, I'm sure that the Republicans will come up with all sorts of stories about how I'm a communist or a socialist or whatever it is, because I believe that the government needs to, on an emergency basis, support transition to clean energy. They would attack me because I support single-payer health insurance. Once again, I am to think single-payer health insurance is in the interest of the small business person. Business people have to compete with the big corporations that can provide health care for their employees for a lot less than small, medium-sized businesses. So I have a pro-business agenda, but they're going to characterize it, of course, as some sort of a far-left agenda. And I'm just going to fight back and say let's focus on the dollars and cents. Let's focus on the impact on voters and on their wallet. This election is going to be about the economy. People are frightened about the economy, and the Republicans are trying to blame inflation on President Biden. And I'm going to let them know it's about price fixing. Price fixing by the oil and gas companies have been paying off the Republican politicians. Price fixing by the food companies, the food processing companies, the big beef and chicken and pork. And yes, I'm going to take on Hormel, which is a defendant in one of these laws as well, and about half a dozen lawsuits across the country for fixing the price of pork. And bottom line is, this is not President Biden's fault. This is about the failure of the Trump administration to take on the big corporate monopolies. Now, are we for the little person or are we for the top 1%? Well, I think I'll get 99% of the vote. That's my goal, 99%.
Thank you. The next question is on healthcare, actually, which you've touched on already, and that is in the chat. We can all agree that our healthcare system is broken, with too many unable to afford or access care. How would you propose to make healthcare accessible for all constituents in southern Minnesota, both rural and urban?
Well, there are two ways that healthcare is inaccessible. One is cost, and the second is geographic proximity. With respect to cost, we need to cut out the insurance companies of the middle people. All they do is push the paper around, collect money from us, and then keep us on hold on the phone every time we want to file any kind of a claim that isn't the typical claim. And I've found the insurance companies just a pain in the backside to deal with. I'd like to cut them out. Now, we aren't going to be able to do it overnight, but to establish a single payer system that Americans can at least opt into on a short-term basis and try and move toward everyone being on a single payer system, that is going to be a lot more efficient. And also, as I said, I think small businesses shouldn't have to worry about providing healthcare for their employees and competing with big corporations there. So that's about the money. Now, when it comes to geographic proximity, once again, we do need some government assistance here to fund hospitals in rural areas, not only to be open and to have the facilities there, but to teleconnect with the big hospitals. And there's a lot you can do with telemedicine. So you could have some doctors in a rural hospital who can then communicate with the doctors in Rochester at the Mayo Clinic. we're the specialists and look at images and so forth. But you need to have the telemedicine equipment in place in order to do that. And that's something that the government needs to play a part in. Once again, it makes absolutely no sense for rural Americans to be against government. A well-run government, ever since the Roosevelt administration, it's been very, very clear that a government that cares about rural Americans can do an enormous amount, whether it's with respect to energy or healthcare or farm subsidies. We cannot just have healthcare be a luxury for the people living in the big cities.
Thank you. Our next question is on education and inclusion, and that's in the chat as well. How would you propose to support public education, especially in rural areas, and stand up for students from all backgrounds and identities?
It is critically important that we adequately fund K through 12 education. That's the future of our country. That is the most important investment. We are not adequately funding K through 12 education, whether it's in the city of Minneapolis, where we just saw a teacher strike over the inadequate compensation and difficult working conditions for teachers, or in rural areas. Funding education is absolutely critical as a priority for our government. With respect to higher education, the United States is the only country among the industrialized countries of the world where students incur massive debt in order to go to a four-year college, community college, trade school. And we need to fix that. And we need to get back to a system we had in the 1960s and 70s, where a lot of public institutions of higher education, including community colleges and universities, had free or low-cost tuition. Affordability is absolutely critical for inclusion in our education system, and increasingly, college, particularly four-year college, is becoming a luxury for the rich, and that perpetuates economic inequality, which then in turn perpetuates racial inequality in our country. This is a critically important issue for us to tackle.
Thank you. As for the economy, and this is in the chat as well, rural economies have suffered under the Republican free trade model. What would you do to restore the Southern Minnesota economy and support workers, struggling individuals and families, and small businesses?
Well, first, we did not need this trade war with China that Donald Trump got going, and he threw racist rhetoric in there just to make sure he could exacerbate the problem. Now, I understand that the Chinese industries are dumping some products in the United States, and cheap labor and that competes unfairly with American labor, and we do need to confront that. So I'm not a 100% free trader. I think that's a mistake. But on the other hand, starting a trade war with China, as I believe President Trump did unnecessarily, without provocation, with racist rhetoric on top, makes it that much worse. And of course, farmers lost a major export market that way. Second, as I've already mentioned, we can generate wind energy as well in rural America, including on our farms. That's more money in the back pocket of farmers and others in rural America, which will help energize the economy. Third, we need to break the monopolies. Farmers deal with monopolies on their inputs and on their outputs. John Deere, you buy a machine, and guess what? You got to get it fixed. Who can fix it? John Deere, for a fortune. You got to mortgage your farm to get your tractor fixed. I mean, it's ridiculous. If the seed and everything that you buy as a farmer, you're buying from corporate monopolies, and then you want to turn around and sell, and you're selling your grain into a market dominated by the big food processing companies, the General Mills. And yes, I know General Mills is powerful in Minnesota, but I don't care. They have monopoly power when they buy in the Cargill as well. There's another one. And of course, on the meat side, I've already talked about the pork, poultry, and chicken monopolies. So farmers are getting squeezed by corporate monopolies on both sides when they buy and when they sell. And we're going to bust those monopolies. That's what we need to do. And I support the Biden administration. They're starting to go after monopolies in the food processing industry, at least. So farmers get a fair shake and consumers get a fair shake. And it doesn't just all go into CEO's pocket.
Thank you. On the environment, and you've touched upon this already, but maybe if there's anything else you care to elaborate, what policies do you propose to address climate change? Which groups, resources, or individuals would you consult to shape your policy on the environment? And what can we do here in Minnesota?
Well, I'm a strong proponent of conservation, but I do think that we need to emphasize energy production, wind, solar, and wind, water generated energy, clean energy production, absolutely critical for the United States to become the world's leader in clean energy production. The Chinese are actually beating us in wind and solar. And so we keep giving them a hard time about their use of coal in China and blame climate change on the Chinese. But the fact about it is they're getting ahead of us in wind and solar. And we've let that happen because we don't invest in wind and solar. We say, well, the private sector will take care of it. And the private sector will take care of it eventually. But just like with the internet we're using today, the government money invented the internet. Major educational institutions, including the University of Illinois, where I used to teach. That's what got the internet going. And then private industry got in when there's money to be made. This is going to be the same thing with wind and solar energy. We have to invest, and we need to be the world's leader in this area in producing clean energy. Absolutely critical. So that would be number one priority. I also am a strong advocate for clean water. I've worked with former Governor Arnie Carlson to oppose sulfide mining in northern Minnesota by foreign mining conglomerates that want to pollute the boundary waters. We also need to protect clean water in the Mississippi. Water is Minnesota's most valuable asset. And with climate change, fresh water is going to be harder and harder to come by. And we need to protect it. Absolute number one priority.
Thank you. With regard to the election, we have unique circumstances here with this special election, and I put this in the chat, and it's confusing to a lot of voters, but in simple terms, a candidate could win the simple primary election in May and then lose the official primary on August 9th. This interim period is one where the candidate who wins the special primary could be especially vulnerable to negative ads. We believe the best strategy for winning in November is to support the winner of the May 24th special primary through to the November election. Given these high stakes, would you be willing to support the winner of the special primary in May?
Well, any of the candidates who are here today, I think would be fabulous to represent this district in the House of Representatives. So I just want to leave it at that. I'm not the only good candidate in this race. Now, we don't just support someone because they say they're Democrat. Now, I've been through that with the Republican Party. That's how I ended up with Donald Trump. So, it's important that you have a candidate who shares the values of the voters in the district. But I believe every candidate you have here today shares those values. And if prefer one of the other candidates here, then look, let's go for it.
Thank you. Is there anything that our attendees, and let me put this on gallery view, anything that our attendees would like to ask? And actually, let's start with Ellie has her hand up. So why don't you go, Ellie?
Hi there. I am just repeating a comment or a question that I've made of everybody. It sounds like you're going through to the primary anyway. But my question is, or my request is that if any of the candidates, and again, I'm asking all of the candidates, if they do not win the DFL endorsement at the congressional district, the May 14th endorsement, I'm encouraging folks to continue on to the primary. I mean, to stay in the race through the primary, because we're all of us voters are still getting to know you, and getting to know all of the candidates. And I think that is a better way to determine who should move forward rather than just having it be the DFL endorsed candidate. Tim Waltz did this. He ran against the DFL endorsed candidate. He won the primary and he won the election. Same with Mark Dayton. So that's just a request I'm making of all candidates. That may not endear you to some folks, but that's something to consider, I think. My question is, if you were to win the primary, the fact that you do not live in the district is going to be a problem with a lot of people. Well, that might be a problem for you to win the primary anyway. How do you respond? And the Republicans will come at you with that. How do you respond to that?
I'll be moving to Faribault.
Oh.
And so I will be moving. There's no way I'm going to represent this district without living in the district. It's going to be important to be able to travel the district and talk to people in the district. And Faribault is reasonably essentially located. That's what I'm going to do. I'm going to be there in May or later in April, and then through the summer, because there's a second primary coming up in August. And so we're going to be fighting the Republicans in August at the same time as we may have other candidates in the still in the race for the primary in August. And of course, that's a slightly different district. For example, Mr. DeVoe's Red Wing would come into the first congressional district in August. So we're going to have it's going to be a complex situation, but we got to keep fighting through August. And I believe the DFL is encouraging candidates to continue through August.
Oh, good.
I believe that's the position of the DFL.
Okay, thank you. I didn't know that.
I believe. I mean, I don't know, but it'd be strange to have a candidate picked in May in a primary involving a district that doesn't even include Red Wing and certain other areas, and then say that we're going to just write off the primary in August. But I don't know what people want to do about that. Most important is to choose a candidate who represents the values of the people. This is not to be a bought election. This corporate Democrat business has been going on in parts of the party for too long. And what it does is it empowers Donald Trump and people like Donald Trump. If Democrats are perceived to be in the back pocket of the big corporations, I will tell you, it's the Republicans who are really in the back pocket of the big corporations. And that's why we have all this price fixing. They weren't enforcing antitrust laws for the entire Trump administration. We're going to fight back.
Thank you.
Thank you. We have a question in the chat from Beth. Is there any part of the current DFL platform that you do not support, or anything that you would add to the DFL platform?
Well, I've been unable to persuade the DFL to categorically come out against sulfide mining in Minnesota. We do not need sulfide mining. Either the polymet mine, which is really a Glencore mine. Glencore is a company close to Vladimir Putin. The former CEO got the Medal of Friendship from Vladimir Putin. And we don't need Glencore running that polymet mine up there. And we certainly don't need the Twin Metals mine in the Boundary Waters. And so I have been for years urging the DFL to categorically reject sulfide mining near major waterways in Minnesota. I believe a more robust environmental platform would be very important. And also I think that we ought to be more aggressive about moving towards single payer financing for healthcare. I've been asked about, I believe, about the woman's right to choose. I support the woman's right to choose with respect to all healthcare decisions, including abortion. And we may have a problem with the Supreme Court this summer. So that will mean the need to enact legislation to codify as much as we can of Roe versus Wade nationwide.
Thank you. There's a question here in the chat from Marion, who asks, do you support policies that would immediately address economic insecurity for individuals who struggle with childcare responsibilities and childcare costs with wages that don't keep up with the cost of living?
Our economy would grow enormously if we had government sponsorship of childcare up through kindergarten and then after school. It would enable parents to get into the workforce and generate taxable income. So strictly as an economic matter, it makes no sense not to have government subsidies for childcare. What we've got right now is a situation where the rich can afford childcare. So people in very high income earning professions can get into the workplace, but people with more moderate incomes have enormous pressure to have one of the parents stay home And I don't care what the Republicans want to say about so-called family values. I don't think that's consistent with family values. Children need to, at a young age, be able to socialize with other children, get into pre-K programs. And we need parents to be able to get themselves into the workforce and get the experience they need. And the real family values involve education and work opportunities. So it would be a moneymaker for the American people if the government were to have a much more active role in supporting childcare, particularly in those younger years.
Great, thank you. There's a question in the chat that I think you've already answered with regard to a woman's right to choose in terms of pregnancy. So we're going to skip over that one because you've already stated that you support that. Any other questions from attendees, either typed in the chat or if you want to raise your hand? And okay. Ellie.
Hi there. Say, we spoke briefly at the Blue Earth County Convention, and you were able to share with me your views about immigration. But I thought I've been asking each candidate what their views were, and would you mind sharing with the rest of the group what you think about it? Because that's what Republicans are going to be talking about, immigration and how Democrats are for open borders. So how do you respond, or what are your thoughts about it? You're on mute.
You're on mute.
I'm very sorry. I have not met any Democrats who are for completely open borders. Both the Obama administration and the Biden administration have had an approach to orderly immigration, dealing with a difficult situation as best we can. Now, the fact of the matter is we need Congress to cooperate. There are people who've been in this country for a long time, who've been contributing to our economy, and we ought to make citizens. And we need a path to citizenship for people who've been here, contributing to our economy. And Congress needs to pass the legislation. And there's only so much the president can do through executive order. And so that legislation needs to get through. Presidents Clinton, Bush, Obama pushed for such legislation. And it never happened. So that's a priority. Is creating paths to citizenship for people who are here. We also need an orderly guest worker program. People can come here, make money, and go home. We need workers in this country. Now, we don't want workers coming in and undercutting wages for organized labor. So, and that's part of what's generating all this racism. It's the not behavior of immigrants. It's the behavior of corporations that when they are faced with higher wages and unions, they go and they outsource to non-union plants. And then the non-union plants, and so that's also been an issue in the meatpacking industry, and they outsource to non-union plants with immigrant labor. And then you have a lot of anger toward immigrants and immigrants being mistreated in those plants. So immigrants are in this country are entitled to the full protection of our labor laws. And there should be a guest worker program. And we need to give a path to citizenship for people who've been here for a long time. This problem can be dealt with, but we've had enough of the racism from the Republicans and enough of the big corporations abusing the situation. And by the way, if we're going to go after anybody with respect to the immigration problem, go after the employers. That's where the problem is, including the Trump organization that was hiring a lot of people for substandard wages in their projects. So if you go after the employers, who are illegally employing people or employing people with substandard conditions, we can solve a lot of the problems rather than building some foolish wall down there on the southern border.
Thank you. We have one question left and 1 minute left. So if you could briefly, let's see how briefly you can respond to this question. How would you address the culture wars?
Well, a lot of these culture wars are generated because of frustration with economic inequality. We have a lot of poverty in our inner cities in the United States, predominantly minorities. We have a lot of poverty in rural areas, predominantly white. The common theme is economic inequality and inequality of economic opportunity for the younger generation. Now, there are two ways to approach it. One is what the Republicans have been doing, particularly under Donald Trump, which is to try to get these two groups going at each other and argue about something called critical race theory, which has absolutely, by the way, nothing to do with what's being taught in public schools when we teach students that actually there was such a thing as slavery. I mean, I don't know how you could teach American history without teaching some of the fundamental facts about our past. But either we can get into some big back and forth in culture wars, we can focus on creating economic opportunity while recognizing we've had a problem with racism. And by the way, racism isn't a theory. That's why I hate that word being used. It's a fact. It's a fact, not a theory. We need to confront it. We need to deal with it. Economic inequality is a fact. Once again, not a theory. And we need to deal with it. And I'm going to throw climate change in there too. Every time I hear that word theory, I think of conspiracy theories. I'm here to talk about reality. And we better confront reality, and we better do it together and stop being going at each other all the time.
Thank you. It is now, yes, it is now 2:31. I just wanted to note that there is a comment in the chat from Marion. To follow up, you spoke a lot about monopolies and how they're detrimental to the economy and the environment. I lived in Flint, Michigan for many years and saw how a company town having a downturn can have horrible effect on a community. How would your ideas help communities that have gone through that situation? And I'm if you could take just 1 minute to address, I hate leaving questions unasked. So just really quickly, and then we will take a break and invite our attendees to stay so we can process some of this this event together and ask our candidate and thank our candidates for joining us. So Richard, if you could just really quickly.
Monopolies are about two things. One is the economic price, power to fix prices. As I said, the price paid to the farmer and the price paid by consumers. And there's an enormous economic cost of monopolies. And that's why we need to take them on. But the other part is the political cost. When you have enormous corporate power, guess who owns the politicians? Guess who owns the mayor of a place like Flint, the city council? It's the corporations. Guess who gets to choose the next congressperson? The CEO of the biggest company in town. Guess who gets the endorsements from the mayors? The CEO of the company. I mean, that's called monopoly power. And it affects our political system. Teddy Roosevelt understood that, and Woodrow Wilson in the progressive era. And that's what progressive politics was about, was busting up the political power of monopolies, railroad monopolies that ripped off the farmers. And the farmers were the victims of monopolies. And we need to revive the progressive politics of 100 years ago, going after those big monopolies that think they run this congressional district and run the rest of the country and run the US Congress.
All right, thank you. Thank you to all of our candidates for being here today, and to all of our attendees for asking your questions and engaging. We're going to take 5 minutes to take a break, stand up, stretch your legs, grab a drink, and then we will reconvene. It is 2:33 right now. We'll reconvene, let's say, yeah, just in 5 minutes right before 2:40, so that we can kind of process everything that we've heard. Thank you to our candidates, and we will, we will see you. We'll encourage people to get in touch if they have further questions and share that information. So thank you very much. And I am stopping the recording. Yes, thank you. And I'm stopping the recording now. Our discussion among attendees will be private. So thank you.